In the final months of World War II, as the cold grip of winter began to give way to the uncertain thaw of spring, the armies of the United States pressed relentlessly into the heart of Germany, and with every mile they advanced, the reality of the Nazi regime's collapse became more visible. The towns, once brimming with uniformed soldiers and propaganda posters, now reduced to rubble and silence. Civilians moving cautiously through shattered streets, unsure whether to fear the thunder of artillery or to welcome it as the sound of liberation. And soldiers of the American divisions, hardened by years of combat in North Africa, Italy and France, found themselves moving through a landscape that was both militarily strategic and deeply human. Every burned-out farmhouse a reminder of resistance, every abandoned helmet in the mud a sign of the Wehrmacht's crumbling will. Yet the fighting was not without intensity. As in the Rhineland and later in the Ruhr, German units still mounted fierce defenses, desperate to slow the inevitable tide, knowing full well that their Third Reich was living its final weeks, but determined, at least in some corners, to fight on with fanatical loyalty. And so the Americans, supported by overwhelming air power and logistical strength, crossed rivers under fire, seized bridges that became lifelines for their advance, and pushed into industrial cities whose factories had once fueled the Nazi war machine. And as they did, they encountered a civilian population caught between fear and relief, some defiant to the last, others already exhausted by years of bombardment, rationing, and loss, children staring with hollow eyes as tanks rolled past, mothers clutching infants while white sheets hung from windows as makeshift flags of surrender. And all the while the GIs, young men from Ohio, Texas, California, and countless other states, advanced with a mixture of determination, disbelief, and weariness, for they knew they were witnessing history, yet also longed simply to go home, to leave behind the ruins of Europe and the endless mud of German fields. Still they pressed forward, and with every liberated town, with every overrun outpost, more evidence emerged of the horrors hidden by the Nazi state, as camps once concealed behind barbed wire and guarded towers were now thrown open, revealing skeletal prisoners who staggered toward their liberators with eyes full of gratitude and trauma, their stories whispered in broken voices, their bodies fragile shadows of survival. And for many American soldiers, hardened though they were by combat, these sights were beyond comprehension. A revelation that what they were fighting for was not merely the defeat of an enemy army, but the ending of a machinery of cruelty. And so the advance took on a deeper moral urgency. Even as resistance continued, even as snipers fired from church towers, even as ambushes along wooded roads claimed the lives of comrades, and still the columns moved east, converging on the Elbe River, where they would soon meet the advancing Soviets coming from the other side, and the realization grew that the war was closing, that this storm of destruction which had engulfed Europe for 6 years was finally burning itself out. But the cost was everywhere visible, in the rows of white crosses left behind in temporary cemeteries, in the smoke that still rose from villages shelled only hours before, in the silence of those who had lost too much to ever rejoice. And yet, alongside the devastation, there was a sense of purpose, of finality, of history coming to its brutal climax. For in April 1945, as American troops secured cities like Nuremberg and Munich, and as their reconnaissance units pushed deeper into Bavaria, news spread of Hitler's bunker in Berlin, of a regime collapsing in paranoia and despair. And though the Americans would not be the ones to storm Berlin itself, their role in cutting through the heart of Germany was decisive, ensuring that the Nazi war machine had no room left to breathe, no chance to regroup, no future beyond its fast-approaching surrender. And so it was that on May 8, 1945, the guns finally fell silent, and victory in Europe was declared, and the American soldiers who had marched across France, crossed the Rhine, and seen the heart of Germany now paused, looking across rivers at their Soviet counterparts, sharing cigarettes and wary glances, knowing that the alliance of necessity might not last beyond the defeat of their common enemy. Yet for that moment, there was relief, there was exhaustion, there was the knowledge that the mission was done. And in the aftermath, as Germany lay in ruins, as displaced persons wandered roads in search of homes that no longer existed, as trials were prepared for those responsible for crimes too great to fully measure. The American advance into Germany was remembered not only as a military victory, but as a human story of liberation and devastation, of cruelty confronted and hope slowly rekindled, of ordinary soldiers carrying the weight of extraordinary history and the echoes of those days in 1945. The uncensored sights and sounds of an empire's fall continue to remind us of the cost of tyranny and the enduring price of freedom. For war is never clean, never without suffering. But in those closing months, the world saw both the darkest depths of human cruelty and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. And thus, the endgame of 1945 remains not just a chapter in history books, but a living memory, whispered in the ruins, carried in the faces of survivors, and honored in the silence that followed when the last shots were fired, when the last flags of surrender were raised, and when the long night of war gave way, at last, to the uncertain dawn of peace.